Good luck. Ta-ra.
Carol Greathead is a miner's wife. Although her husband retired from the pits 10 years ago through ill health, she's out campaigning for miners' jobs.
Hi, Maureen, are you ready? Yep.
Her friend Maureen's husband works at Hatfield Main Colliery near Doncaster. He's on strike against pit closures. Carol and Maureen have been on the picket lines too. Now they're going on a demonstration.
Well, it's a good day for it anyway.
Normally up here, though, you'd consider it men's work, wouldn't you, to go on pickets and demos?
Well, in Yorkshire, we're very liberated, you know. We believe in equality, you know. We don't need a woman to tie her down or change her nappy, anything like that, you know.
The wives have joined the miners' campaign against pit closures. With 4 million unemployed elsewhere in Britain, they fear that their families face a life on the dole.
They're getting involved because they're fighting for their future as well as our future and the children, you know.
So far, the miners' strike has not been total. It's closed 121 pits out of the coal board's 175, but 45 pits are working normally. Most of these are in Nottinghamshire, where the area's union members voted not to strike. The Nottingham men's decision to go on working is backed by their wives. They're sceptical of what a strike could achieve.
We have the right to go to work. The Yorkshire men chose to go on strike, and they came down here to talk to us, as they say, but it isn't talk, it's intimidation. And we made our choice to work, and we have the right to work.
A great divide separates the mining communities of Britain. This week, a national delegate conference of the Miners' Union will decide whether to reduce the majority required for a national strike from 55% to 50%. The dispute, now in its 6th week, involves the Miners' Union, the Coal Board and the government. It also divides the union itself. World in Action followed 7 miners' wives who are active on both sides of the campaign in Yorkshire, Kent and Nottingham. The government wants to make the coal industry profitable. They say this means closing uneconomic pits. The Coal Board has not yet said which pits will close, but admits that 20,000 jobs will be lost in the next 12 months through natural wastage and voluntary redundancies. The union says that 60 or 70,000 jobs will go in the next 3 years if the government and the Coal Board get their way. That's a third of the industry. In their view, no pit is safe. Snowdown Colliery near Aylsham in Kent. This pit, like 23 others, was threatened with closure 3 years ago. There was still plenty of coal in it, but under government cash limits, the Coal Board said it was too costly to get it out. After a strike in 1981, the government backed down and agreed to subsidise investment in a new seam. Now, Ian McGregor, the new Coal Board chairman, plans to close uneconomic pits. Snowdown is fighting for its life once again.
That's got a lot of coal in that mine. So why should he say that's uneconomical when there's all that coal in there? And does he think it's more economical then to be all these men to be unemployed and pay them dole for the rest of their life? It doesn't make sense. And what do they want people to be? Cabbages? Do they want people to be cabbages, just live on the dole and have nothing? Because you know yourself, and I know, we have got to do something to keep our mind active and our bodies active. We don't want that kind of life.
The threat of closure is a threat to the whole community of Aylsham. The pit has been the heart of the village for 50 years.
They came from Wales in 1936, and my father walked from Wales to Aylsham. It was a depression in Wales, in the coal mines. And also, the dust was so thick before their levies. They thought they'd come up to Kent, where there's a new mine opening, and maybe the conditions would be slightly better. And this village was absolutely deserted. There was only a few streets. And we couldn't speak a word of English to children. They were all Welsh. So we were like foreigners in a strange land. And we've made our living in Aylsham ever since, with working down the coal mine.
The women's campaign to save the pit is built on the close-knit ties of the community. The action group started at the weekly Skittles meeting of the women's section of the social club. Margaret Davis is the club treasurer. She's also the fundraiser for the miners' support group. She has a full-time job as well as 3 children.
If anybody had have told me that I'd be doing today what I am doing, I'd never have believed it, because I've never done anything like this before at all. But we're doing what we think is right. So we've got to do it, and that's it. And we're dashing all over the place marching. We're holding meetings, getting all the women together. We've started to organise the distribution of food parcels. And I'm just never in. I'm out all the time doing something.
Where's your husband at the moment?
I'm not quite sure. He's either in South London or somewhere else picketing, but I'm not quite sure where he is.
Apart from mining, there are few jobs for men in Aylsham. More than 500 jobs have been lost in the last 4 years. 3 factories have closed. They're now let as warehouse space.
We've worked hard for what we've got. My dad, my granddad, they all worked hard. They fought to get a decent union for the miners. They fought to get jobs for everybody, and they fought for a decent way of living. And Maggie Thatcher and Norm McGregor's taken that from us because we won't let her do it. They want to wipe everything that anybody's ever worked for away. And no way, we're not sitting back and letting that happen. Margaret Thatcher and McGregor have both said they won't give in. Well, I'd like to tell Margaret Thatcher, there's no way we'll give in, and she's not living like we're living. She's not feeding 3 children like I'm feeding them on about £20 for groceries. She's not doing that. But we'll stick it out.
I'm a woman, she's a woman.
She's
not the only woman in this country who has her say and does what she wants, because I'm a woman too. So why can't they listen to our kind of women instead of her for a change?
Down in Kent there is the strike that the government don't like.
Last week, these Kent women went to Nottinghamshire to try and get their message across to yet another kind of woman, those miners' wives in Nottingham who oppose the strike.
Strike, strike, strike against the closures. Join the miners in the fight.
We are going to stand by our men and make sure that they have got all the backing they can get. And I would say to the Nottingham miners that will not come out, stand up and be counted. Our fight is your fight, and no redundancy payments are worth anything. No man has the right to sell another man's job.
The March of the Kent Women in Mansfield attracted miners' wives from all over the country.
The closure of pits affects us as much as it does the men who work in them, being miners' wives. And we're here to show our support and solidarity and to prove that women have a very valuable role to play in the struggle.
The Nottingham people and other people that are against the strike are taking the bread out of our kids' mouths. But it's the future that we're talking about. We're not living for today. We've got to think about our tomorrows.
Have you met any Nottingham wives
No,
yet?
but I'd like to. I would like them to stand up and come and give their reasons to us why they want their husbands to work. Not battle. Let's talk it out and talk sense.
Jane Paxton is the wife of a Nottingham miner. Brian is a surface worker at Moor Green Pit. They have 3 children. When the miners' dispute began, flying pickets from Yorkshire came down to Nottingham pits.
Perfect right, I suppose, to come and pick it peacefully, but they didn't do that. They just didn't pick it peacefully. And, I mean, it caused a lot of ill feeling. And I'm sure swayed the ballot in Nottinghamshire, probably. A lot of men that probably would have voted for a strike decided not to because of this action, what they took.
Jane Paxton rang the local paper to make a protest.
What has been the response of your husband's workmates to the publicity you've had?
1 or 2 have had a few digs. My missus won't say that kind of thing, and I won't let my wife do it.
There's been a certain amount of mickey-taking, you know, jokes, which are nothing really. There's been a few say that about the old apron string thing, the under the thumb. But I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of other wives should help support him because it throws the other side of the coin up for a while. Also, the miners that are on strike, their wives are supporting them, which is a good thing. What the argument's about is always actually right.
The Moor Green pit is scheduled to close next year when the coal board calculates it will become uneconomic. The men have chosen not to fight to keep it open and to take one more year's wages before they're moved on. They say a strike will bring that closure forward.
Our pit, Moor Green, will close if there is a strike. I mean, it has been quoted by an NUM and an NCB official that it would cost too much to reopen it again. So this pit will have been closed through strike action. I can't see what it gains, quite honestly. They're not closing all the pits. I mean, they're only closing so many. I mean, there will be jobs. It's just a matter if they want to travel to go to another pit. I mean, quite honestly, we'd be prepared to travel so long as Brian's got a job. I mean, it all depends how bad you want a job. I don't agree with pits being closed that are profitable, but if there's no coal there, there's no point in mining it. If it's costing too much to mine it, and people aren't buying it, there's no point in keeping it open.
Whether or not some of their pits are going to close, the men in Nottingham voted overwhelmingly not to strike against the coal board plans. It's traditionally a moderate area, but like every other mining community, the men came out on strike in the last national miners' dispute in 1974.
At that strike, we were fully committed behind that decision because the men were very badly paid and there was no bonus payment at that time. So we did stand behind the strike because we believed in what it was for. But not this time. We feel it's been very badly handled from the executive and the president's point of view. They've handled the whole situation disgracefully, putting area against area, trying to get a national strike. And the men in this area feel that it's got to be done democratically.
So far in this strike, the miners' leadership has avoided balloting the national membership. Some areas like Yorkshire, Scotland and Kent went on strike at the recommendation of local union councils. 8 other areas, including Nottingham, held a vote of their own members. But only one of those areas, Northumberland, voted for a strike.
Well, I don't believe in strikes at all, but definitely not at this time of the year, no. I don't think it would win anything.
Karen Carter and her husband Les disagree on one point. He voted for a strike in Nottingham's ballot. They do agree that the whole membership of the union should be allowed to vote.
We've been told that this is an area dispute. Our union leaders are saying it's an area dispute. We can't have a national ballot over it. But we don't believe that at all. See, we think that it's going to affect the whole industry. We're under no illusion that Nottinghamshire is going to be spared and everywhere else is going to go under the hammer. We think it's going to affect the whole industry. Let the whole industry vote on it.
Democracy in the miners' union is a complicated process. A vote of members in the Nottingham area went against strike action, but their local executive instructed members not to cross picket lines. So, in spite of the fact that he personally voted for a strike, Les Carter made a protest. He crossed the picket lines and, with 4 other miners, stayed down the pit until an area delegate conference overturned the executive's decision.
I voted for a strike in the area ballot we had. I actually voted for a strike, but at the end of the day, the majority, it doesn't matter what the issue is, has got to rule. And I believe that you've got to stick up for majority rule. That's the whole idea of the democratic process.
Would you be frightened that you wouldn't be able to make ends meet in the strike?
I don't think so. Nowadays, you don't get thrown out in the streets and people don't starve. Whatever we've got that isn't paid for, they can come and take away, and we can always buy again.
Karen, do you think that it's not necessary to strike to save the jobs of future generations?
Well, to be quite honest, they talk of future generations wanting work at the pit. If I had a son, I wouldn't want my son to have to go down the pit anyway. I think it's a disgusting job, and unless you actually do it, you're not aware of how terrible the job is. Apart from that, I think it's quite a romantic idea that you can be saving jobs for children who are still at school when there's almost 4 million of our own generation that can't find jobs.
Until there is a national vote, Karen Carter will support her husband's determination to clock on for his shift. Every day, this means crossing a picket line. Until the strike is properly authorised, the pickets are unofficial. Last week, they were women from the Yorkshire pits.
I've crossed a lot of picket lines in the last few weeks, and I feel terrible about it. But as far as I'm concerned, until it's an official picket line, then I'll cross. If it's an official picket line, I'll never cross an official picket line.
One of the Yorkshire pickets Les Carter drove past was Maureen Douglas. For women like her, this strike's quite different from the miners' strikes of 1972 and 1974.
The strikes were different then. They were economic strikes in a sense. They were pay strikes. This whole situation is different. What we're talking about now is communities, the loss of communities like we've seen in the steel industry, ghost towns. And I think that it's just this, there is a general realisation among people and among women that this strike is different and this strike means something else.
Like her neighbour Carol, Maureen's husband's job is not immediately affected. But for both of them, pit closures anywhere strike at the livelihood of all mining families and their history.
It doesn't matter where the closures are. If there's a closure in Nottingham at the end of next year, we are on strike now to keep that pit open. And we're on strike now to keep any pit open anywhere.
My grandfather walked from Lank, my dad walked from Durham, and my father-in-law, his father, came first from Sunderland to find room here for his family. And they walked to find work, and they found work here. You know, there's nowhere else. This is the end. There's nowhere else for anybody to walk to.
This is Carol's family. Her son Kieran is 11. Her husband Brian was disabled from the pit 10 years ago. His father Bill has retired with a chest complaint. Now he paints pictures for his grandson.
I feel as though what I've got has been a struggle for, and I want to keep. But I don't want my family to have the life I had. And I feel as if I've got to fight for them, because if I don't, you know, who else is there in this household anyway to do it for them? I'm frightened for Kieran, him not getting a job when he leaves school. There'll be no job for him to go to.
We asked the women from Nottingham who oppose the strike to talk to the women from Yorkshire who are supporting it. The points at issue, how the strike had been handled and what was to be done about pit closures. But first, why was it that Nottinghamshire had so far rejected the strike call?
This may or may not be true. I'm willing to be told one way or the other. That the men in Nottingham have had high wages, high bonuses, right? Because they happen to have the correct geological conditions. Yeah. They've got used to living on high wages. They don't like not having wages. It's made them moderate. That successive governments have tried to create a moderate area in Nottingham and set them separate from the rest of the coalfields.
What's so bad about being moderate?
What do you think our husbands earn? We went through Brian's wage slips for the last 5 years, and the highest bonus he's ever had is £25 a week. So we don't earn high wages. Brian bought home on Friday, £82. Now, would you call that high? I mean, I don't know what your husband's in.
Yeah. Well,
so then we're not higher paid than you.
We're no different from you. We're no different to you at all. Our men work for the coal board and they have the same rates of pay as your men. So there's no difference there at all. There's only one reason that I've heard. In the 50s and the 60s, when the Durham pits were closing, the Yorkshire pits didn't want to know. Their pits were for their men only, and that grievance is still there, and that is what is making our men keep going through the picket lines, because they've never forgotten that grudge.
This grudge you talk about, in my own personal case, we came to Yorkshire in 1966, which is right in the period you're talking about, the 50s and 60s, and so did thousands and thousands of other people. In Doncaster, you'll find that there are a tremendous number of Tynesiders, people from Durham, people from Scotland. So I don't understand. I mean, this grudge is a very misguided grudge, if that's the case.
If you were prepared to move in the 50s and 60s, what have you so got against moving now?
Where is the jobs to move to?
But there are jobs
to go
promised.
to.
There are no jobs being lost at this particular moment of
20,000
time.
jobs have not been promised.
That
comes to the end of the road, look, we have 4 million people unemployed.
That isn't our problem. The
I'm afraid it is our problem.
It is our problem.
So you're just dismissing 4 million unemployed in this country.
Unemployed. We have a government which has been democratically elected to deal with the unemployment
I'm sorry,
problem.
I didn't realise I was talking to a Tory.
You are not. I'm a Labour person, actually.
Oh, Christ.
But that is not our problem. The National Union of Mine Workers deals only with its members. The employment problem belongs to the government. If Mr. Scargill wants to speak for the government, he should put himself up as a politician.
Just as the women were getting together, the union's national leaders met in Sheffield to decide what course to take next in the pit closure campaign. At this stage, 5 weeks into the strike, the president, Arthur Scargill, ruled a proposal to hold a ballot of the membership out of order. Instead, a special conference of union delegates this Thursday will consider relaxing the rule that requires a 55% majority for a strike.
The miners' leader, Mr. Arthur Scargill, has just told the pickets there in Sheffield that under Rule 41, industrial action will continue in the coalfields. And that's the news so far.
If the rule is changed, the demand from moderates for a national ballot may well be accepted. But some strike supporters are suspicious.
As far as I'm concerned, they are demanding a national ballot because they do not intend to take action on pit closures.
Some of our husbands have said that if there was a national ballot, they would have voted to strike. But because of the mass picketing and the way that the union has gone about it, has turned them.
Look, they either believe in the principle of fighting for pit closures or they don't. Not whether the union has gone about it the right way. You either believe in the principle, you either believe in the principle or you don't. And what you've said is that you don't believe in fighting pit closures.
The reason there wasn't a national ballot in the beginning is because the leadership knew that they would not get a strike vote. They've tried in the past to get us all out on strike and they haven't got it. So this time they're trying to get a strike through underhand means and through the back door. And we, if you like, in Nottinghamshire have seen through what the leadership is up to, and we're not going to play. We've said no, enough is enough.
Okay, last year there was a national conference which decided overwhelmingly to support action on pit closures. Now you have said this afternoon that you accept pit closures as inevitable.
Yes, we do.
Does that or does that not go against the national conference decision?
The only area, though, that's actually voted to strike against pit closures is Yorkshire. The last national ballot that was held was that they wouldn't go on strike to support pit closures. That was the last ballot, so if he wants anything different to that, then he should ballot nationally again.
As far as I'm concerned, I see no reason why a minority of people should demand of the majority to vote on whether or not to take action.
But
to vote on whether or not they're going to lose their jobs.
You only have
You're
a majority.
accepting your job losses.
You only have a majority of pits that are closed. You don't necessarily have a majority of people who want to strike against pit closures.
Because why didn't your members, if they believe so strongly, why didn't they come to our branch union meetings and stand in front of us and tell us their points of view? Why did they have to come down en masse and through this intimidation and fear?
Pardon?
En masse picketing. Has your husband been spat on and harassed? Has he had to walk through? My husband is a braver man than yours.
Bags full of urine thrown at him while he's trying to get to work.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not defending particular actions like that have been taken, right? I won't make a statement about that at the moment. But as far as I'm concerned, where has that principle gone that you don't cross a picket line?
Who's made that principle?
It's a traditional principle that's existed since the beginning of trade unions. What we are concerned about
is the fight for jobs.
By 1988, there will be a loss of about 70,000 jobs, and nobody can tell me that those men are going to be offered jobs in the mining industry.
Whose figures do you believe? McGregor's figures.
McGregor destroyed the steel industry.
McGregor's figures and Scargill's.
With no negotiations planned, the stage is set for a long and bitter dispute for these women and their husbands. Yesterday, a poll of miners suggested that opinion had shifted towards a majority for a strike. If Thursday's conference changes the majority required, it's likely to seek a vote for a full national strike. The government is making plans to meet the emergency.